Good evening, and welcome to the second Holloway event of the year. I'm Cecil Giskin. Tonight, our guest is John Taggart, and Jane Gregory will be introducing him in just a little bit. I'll thank the Department of English here at Berkeley for being so invested in and identified with the stuff of poetry. As you know, the Holloway series in poetry is funded through an endowment made by Roberta C. Holloway in 1981. The fund has enabled us to establish a tradition of poetry on campus to celebrate the works of well-known and rising contemporary poets, and to provide an opportunity for graduate students from the UC campus to introduce and read alongside featured poets. The next visitor to the series will be Jean Day on the 25th of October, and following that will be a reading by the Holloway poet Judith Goldman on the 8th of November. Both will be at 6:30 in this room. John Taggart is with us this evening as a guest of both the Holloway series and the Mixed Blood Project. The Mixed Blood Project pairs talks by poets with their readings. The project is unusual, we think, for its literary innovation and its deliberate and very aggressive emphasis on race and the languages of and about race. John Taggart's talk this afternoon on Billy Strayhorn, Henry David Thoreau, Sonny Rollins, and Robert Duncan addressed these languages. We're honored tonight as well by the presence of Margaret Rhee, a PhD student in ethnic studies here at the University of California. Margaret Rhee, as you will soon witness, is also a persistently fearless poet. This in addition to her fearless work as a graduate student. She's a writer of rare combination and invention, a maker of inquiries. She's also a lover of poetry, but not in any sentimental sense. It's that the word love comes up often when she talks about her practice. And she owns as well that her love for poetry is an extremely dangerous, in her words, kind of love. She's working with me this year on the Mixed Blood Project. We're aiming to get the third issue of the journal out in the next few weeks. She's very good about organization. Her very amazing chapbook, Yellow Yellow, has just been published. Do you have copies of that, Margaret? Yep. Oh, they're up here. It's a wonderful book. Its title poem begins, yellow room, yellow lamp, yellow skin, yellow skin, yellow yolk, yellow snot, yellow yellow, yellow yellow, yellow butter, yellow other, yellow moon, yellow stars, yellow discharge, yellow sign. And it exists in uneasy relation to William Carlos Williams' love poem in which he wrote, "The stain of love is upon the world, yellow, yellow, yellow." I'll read you some pieces of a statement Margaret rewrote on her about her practice last year. Margaret wrote, "Questioning, subverting, creating borders and boundaries of our bodies, geographies, our imaginaries, evokes poetic pulse. Questions are everything. Question, transform, and create the body from dominant, hegemonic, patriarchal, racist, and heterosexist paradigms that exist in both real time and cyberspace. In doing so, I hope to break through new terrains, reconfigure the disembodied body, transform subject-object divide, and our conceptions of community and ourselves, into hopeful, fierce interrogations, possibilities, our dreams of life, life, life." Please welcome my friend Margaret Rhee.
I just want to thank Cecil again for that wonderful introduction. It's so meaningful and such an honor, especially since Cecil has been such a formative mentor for me. And many of the poems in the chapbook were actually written in his graduate poetry seminar. So thank you, Cecil. I'm inspired by so many mentors on this campus and by the poetry that happens on at Berkeley generally, and it's a real honor to read for the Holloway Mixed Blood series. So, especially with John Taggart, and I want to thank Lynn Higinian and Rosa Martinez for also inviting me. So I will read from my chapbook published by Tin Fish Press. It's a wonderful small press based out of the University of Hawaii. It's edited by Susan Schultz, and it's one of my favorite presses because of their focus on experimental poetry. They publish some wonderful poets affiliated with Berkeley, like Craig Santos Perez and Barbara Jane Reyes and Jai Aaron Ravine. And so the first poem I'll read is entitled Nectarines, and it's a rosal, and it's intertextual. Nectarines. When my mentor Beth was pregnant, $10 worth satisfied her cravings. She also finished her Stanford dissertation, mouthful of honey, her womb a pit. Was it the baby or the nectarines? Whereas contributions of Korean Americans include the invention of the first beating heart operation for coronary artery disease, a 4-time Olympic gold medalist for diving, and the nectarine. The flesh is delicate, easily bruised in some cultivations. It is a peach with plum skin, a peach without its fur coat. Slice them into a salad or serve them with cheese. This is the way of the nectarines. Judging by their achievements over the past 100 years, theirs is an American story that confirms opportunity in these free United States. The name is from the drink of the Olympic gods called nectar. Julia learned in her freshman year of college, nectarines was created by 2 Korean brothers. The Kim brothers, she said. It's like a peach and a plum together, the nectarine. In the article, The Yellow Pearl, Jack London wrote, the Korean is a perfect type of inefficiency, of utter worthlessness, and tested thus, the Korean always fails. He probably didn't know about the nectarines. Then Julie tells me later, you guys can be the nectarine sisters. And I say more like she's a beautiful rosy peach and I'm a lovely purple plum. And together we make a nectarine family love. Terry Hong. I consider myself Korean and American. A Korean American is a hybrid product of both US and Korean countries and cultures. Beat. I am proud we helped develop the nectarine. For Javier's belated birthday, I decide to make him a sundae, caramel chips, vanilla ice cream, lines of poetry as topping, and before we take a bite, I add his favorite, fresh, plump pieces of nectarines. The first wave of immigrants from Korea began to arrive in the early 1900s. Harry Kim Hyung-soon created history in 1921 with the fuzzless peach, otherwise known as the Sun Grand Nectarine. My parents made love sometime in the year of 1983, and I was born in the Hollywood hospital. I have dad's mouth and mom's eyes. I'm a crossbreed or a hybrid, magnificent mixed breed. Am I a nectarine? So that was the first poem of the chapbook. And the second poem is actually inspired after reading about Flannery O'Connor, and I read her biography. And this poem will be included in a forthcoming chapbook on elegy. And I wanted to dedicate this poem to my dear friend Vanessa Lewis, who's here, amazing performance artist, because I think it speaks to sort of the power and the wonder of women poets and writers. So this poem is entitled The Flannery I Know. The Flannery I'm curious about is a woman stranger than fiction, who moved so far from a world she lived, but not so far from the world she made. I think we'd be friends. And I tell her, just like what I said above, and I like you, not because you are extraordinarily talented or that you have cute glasses, but because you like peacocks. Oh, those feathers glittering green, gold, and blue in the sunlight. Tears of small pregnant suns floated in a green gold haze. Your peacock would waddle into your lap than mine. Peacocks remind me of my father. For days, he would leave our home in Southern California for somewhere else in Southern California. I imagine him walking quietly and sharply, holding his gun, hunting. Poor peafowl, still beautiful when dead. One day he brought one home. It was in the freezer. I opened up the door, peering in, excited to see the green gold fan of feathers that would span from ceiling to ceiling in the icy frozen box. But what I found was a cold silver bowl covered with aluminum foil, a small brown mound, no beautiful halos of green gold suns. That bird was not like the fish my father never caught, more like the ones we found all dead in a puddle on the beach, not too far from where we stood for hours trying to catch something from the ocean. We took them home in plastic bags, but my mom refused to cook them. I don't know whatever happened to those fish, but after that day, my Snoopy fishing pole stood untouched, and I plucked the string, and now I don't remember if a plastic string like that makes a sound at all. You would wrinkle your nose at my fish story, but we would bond, and I'd tell you about my father and his peacock, and you would tell me about your birds, who are so dear. You would be in San Francisco with me, or I would be in Iowa with you. And either way, we'd love each other because we would be surrounded by graduate students who we both hate. Perhaps by this time, my father would have already passed away, and each evening you would work real hard, that sole light bulb above your head, and I'd knock on the door and peer in with a little plate of pistachio cupcakes or something sweet. And maybe you'd smile slightly or look cross by disruption. And so I'd leave and say, hey, let's hang out when you're done. Because I love a woman who is earnest and loves peacock feathers more than anything else. Peacock feathers are not charity, and we would eat them by the mouthfuls until our lips would color green, gold, and yellow, our mouths open up like a galaxy of glazing, bursting suns, eat until it was too much to bear, until our heart's traffic stopped, and we would eat until we died, and we both cry mercy, mercy, as the feathers would stop time. Say, Flannery, the strangeness of our insides, they will never know. So this is my final poem I'll read tonight, and this poem was included in an anthology, Conversations from the Wartime Cafe. It was edited by poet Sean Labrador y Manzano, and this anthology just was published, I think, a few weeks ago, and it's a wonderful collection of poetry after 9/11 from 2001. So this poem was inspired after I heard a talk by the artist Ray Bendler, who created a bust of fermented cabbage. It's actually of kimchi. And so if you don't know, it's a traditional Korean food that's recognized as like sort of Korean soul food. So after I heard his talk and read more about his work, it really piqued my interest in thinking about kimchi. And so I decided to write a series of poems on the feminist history through kimchi. And this one is chapter 10. It's entitled The Military and the Forgotten War, and it's in 3 parts. And it's also intertextual, so it draws from a lot of history and literary theory and different kinds of genres and texts. Chapter 10, The Military and the Forgotten War. 1. In 2000, a U.S. artist, Ray Bendler, got a fellowship to Korea. Perhaps he marveled at the ancient streets juxtaposed by high-tower Cosmo apartments, those Korean schoolgirls so different from the plastic surgery-out Korean stars, and that Korean sky, though I believe it's the same sky here too. He decided to make a dynamic bust of Douglas MacArthur all out of kimchi. White cabbage, red paste, blue eyes. That same General MacArthur who in 1950 was appointed by President Truman to lead the Korean War. The president said, "You can fly the blue and white United Nations flag, you can fly the red and white and blue American flag, and you can fly right into Korea. General MacArthur said, if South Korea were attacked, I would defend it as I would California. The bust is held up by styrofoam, and the artist says, I united our two countries by combining two of our traditional products into a silly temporary monument to the general. Silly games those butches play, silly boy, silly girl, silly putty, silly buddy, silly silly, silly sissy, silly temporary monument to the general. He wants to fly bombs. MacArthur desired commanders' discretion to use atomic weapons. He requested 26 atomic bombs. He had a plan that would have won the war in 10 days. And he said, I would have dropped between 30 to 50 atomic bombs strung around the neck of Manchuria from the Sea of Japan to the Yellow Sea, a belt of radioactive cobalt, which has an active life of between 60 to 120 years. And for at least 60 years, there will be no land invasion of Korea from the north. The bust is 36 by 36 by 18, and once erected, the bust drips with kimchi juice, and it looks like blood. 2. The first military brides from Korea arrived in the 1950s and 60s, a time when immigration from Korea was restricted. American food was so unpalatable that Korean military brides almost died from hunger. They craved kimchi, not butter and cheese. They dreamed of kimchi, not a hamburger. All I could think of was kimchi, one military bride said. If one brought a jar of kimchi from Korea, it was worth more than gold. If even one piece of kimchi is left over, you couldn't bring yourself to throw it away. No matter how small of an amount, you saved it because you didn't know when you would taste kimchi again. No red pepper paste for kimchi was available in 1950s America. Makeshift red pepper paste, makeshift kimchi, almost like, but not quite, those American pickles, almost like, but not quite. In the 1950s all-American evenings, the Korean military brides lay in bed. How the American skin tasted so salty as they made love to their new husbands in a new land. And as they closed their eyes, they dreamed of kimchi, kimchi they could swallow whole. 3. The Korean military brides find artist Ray Bendler's bust in MacArthur, and they take their Montgomery Ward knives and slice open his head. Here, the blood gushes. Here, the pieces of kimchi begin to fall. There is nothing inside, says one military bride, as they realize MacArthur's head is filled with styrofoam. Just as I thought, another remarks as she begins to grab with both hands kimchi. She held her palms up, filled with kimchi, a small prayer, and it was then she knew what we would never know, how it feels to hold your own heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks, John Taggart, especially. In a note to the notes that accompany the poem Were You, which first appeared in his 1991 collection, Loop, and now in the stunning Selected Poems, Is Music, available over there, John Taggart writes of how the poem came to be. Quote, when I began writing some notes for a poetics essay in response to an invitation from Michael Palmer, there was no thought of turning them into a poem. What happened, however, is that the notes proposed a new poem. He goes on, the poem ate them up. Perhaps then, the central principle of any poetics is that it ought to result in poetry. If nothing else, this should moderate the production of poetics essays. While my task this evening is not to deliver a poetics essay, but an introduction, spending the last few days immersed in Taggart's poems, being admitted and initiated by their music, caught up in their momentum, abiding by the principles of his poetics, it is hard not to deliver a poetic response instead of a discursive introduction. This same impulse can be seen in C.D. Wright's foreword to the Selected Poems, which can't help but be a poem itself. The purpose of an introduction is, to my mind, to prepare the room for the poetry, to prime it. Taggart's poems themselves are a kind of priming agent. If we read them as they ask to be read, they will both prepare and invite our minds, our voices, and our bodies to answer them, to speak with them. There is no doubt that John Taggart is a poet whose poems and whose poetics are scarcely matched in their importance in American poetry, both in themselves and for what they teach us about the past and future trajectories of the art. Early in his career as a poet, Taggart received praise from the likes of Robert Duncan, Robert Creeley, and George Oppen, among others. Now, 40 or so years later, young poets are responding to Taggart as he responded to those old guys. No offense about the age. This can be seen in the issue of Little Red Leaves feature of poems for and after John Taggart that came out a few years ago, itself also paying homage to the format of the important journal Maps, founded and edited by Taggart in the 60s and early 70s. We are exceedingly lucky to have John Taggart here with us tonight, and lucky also that Copper Canyon put out Is Music, the selected poems, last year, because in many ways Taggart remains something of an outsider on the scene of American poetry. It is possible that this is a position he prefers, given what being an insider tends towards, both in professional poetry and in other professions. Taggart is difficult to read wearing only the critic's hat. You can't or you shouldn't read Taggart quickly, wearing only the critic's hat, looking for something you can already name so that you can find it, use it, and get your work done. You can, however, use that hat as a prop when the poems compel you to take off your hat, to use it as a prop in the dance they ask you to do. Is Music is important because it allows us to see how Taggart's poems talk to one another, weave together, or as Jack Spicer put it, poems should echo and re-echo against each other. They should create resonances. They cannot live alone any more than we can. The majority of Taggart's 12 books are represented in Is Music, with some important exceptions, books that would be misrepresented if they were not entire but are absolutely worth tracking down on their own, books like Dodeca and When the Saints. Taggart's poems make a room, echo in it, wander around it, stand and silently wave after they invite and admit us. It is not simply that his poems are music. They are music and the words to the music. They make much of poetry's natural affinity with both rhythm and blues, the blues lament, learning the meaning of the blues. They make much of poetry's relationship to jazz through the principles of improvisation and call and response. They are music, they are of music, they are to music, they are the music of is music. One effect of understanding them as music is to reinforce that they must be audible, they must be sounded out. One thing that the selected poems does not do is contain the note that many of Taggart's other books do. From the 1981 Peace on Earth to the 2008 There Are Birds, the note instructs the reader that the poems should be read aloud. I think any serious reader of these poems will discover this imperative for him or herself. Reading the poems aloud to oneself not only makes the own poem's powers manifest, but also inarguably does something to the reader. For those of us who sometimes wonder or are asked what poetry does, what it is there for, what it is good for, reading these poems to oneself will not necessarily answer these questions in paraphrasable ways, but will instead and more finally obliterate those questions. To speak these poems to oneself, and I think it is a worthwhile thing to do even though we have John Taggart here to read to us, is to find oneself occupying the spaces language opens up. The inexhaustible music of these poems continues after you reach the ends of their pages. They get stuck in your head, as songs do. They may occupy and preoccupy you. They are artfully insidious. Nothing positive by these poems has been taken for granted, but instead has been granted to the poem, is as granted, has wandered or warbled into the composing attention of the poem. The poems decompose and reconstruct our attention, make it other than it was. Visually, Taggart's poems include composed spaces in which we may gather ourselves and give the lines time to gather their impact. As he writes in a note to Body and Soul, poem for two readers, not all spaces are to be spoken in. This is a model not only for the reading of these poems, but for communication and apprehension in general. To give voice to these poems, to give space to their silences, is to stand, quote, where everything's given, everything given back. It is to sing as the host sings in his house, Or, as he writes in Marvin Gaye's suite, if we stop long enough, we will be gathered, brought together by the voice. In the way that that poem makes it possible to hear Marvin Gaye if we don't resist reading the poem as it demands to be read, making it read towards song, so it is also possible to hear our own voices giving voice to other voices through John Taggart's voice tonight. In some ways, I am hesitant to talk about what happens when we read these poems aloud to ourselves in terms of otherness, because it is so easy to make what's valuable about the experience poetry provides about sensing otherness, sensing ourselves as other, and these poems do much more than fulfill an already nameable task. These poems fulfill nothing, they open everything, but they also really do make us available for othering, available to otherness. In his essay, The Poem is a Woven Scarf, in his 1994 book, Songs of Degrees, Essays on Contemporary Poetry and Poetics, Taggart writes, the question is, quote, the question is how the poem is to be returned to enacted speech as a first consideration in composition and as a final radical reality. How is the poem to be the voice's enactment of language, one interior calling out to another, so there may be presence and community? To recognize the poems as, end quote, sorry. To recognize the poems as one interior calling out to another, we must be ourselves other so that we may recognize and respond to another. Taggart readies us for this opportunity. Quote, language is hushed language of response, you were ready. Taggart asks us to respond not only with our voices, but also with our bodies, our breath, and our bones. In that same essay, he writes, the model ought not to be the ecstatically still saint, but the moved dancer. The dancer is encouraged to move by the gaps between the notes of music. If there is no room to move, if there cannot be free response to the call, then it is hopeless to expect conversation. Or, as he puts it in the notes to the poem, Were You, if you can't dance, you can't join the assembly. By finding a place in and through the poems that make our own voices stretch towards song, our own bodies impelled towards dance, this is what Taggart offers, an opportunity to join or form the assembly. Otherness in these poems is not easily nor cheaply approached. They make us hear other voices and our own voices, quote, to the wrong beat, so that we hear how listening and responding changes things, changes our ears and our voices, the dance they lead us to do, and how we compose ourselves to assemble. Both exceeding and undermining the instrumental function of language, which Taggart's poems, in their characteristic resemblance to chant, to anthem, to dance, help us remember that language is an instrument and an element of communication, of song, of movement. When we are ready, as the poems ask us to be, quote, there are still the movements to be made. John Taggart was born in Iowa in 1942 and grew up in Indiana. He studied at Earlham College, the University of Chicago, and Syracuse University. He is the author of over a dozen books of poetry, a book of essays on contemporary poetry and poetics, Songs of Degrees, already mentioned, and Remaining in Light, Ant Meditations on a Painting by Edward Hopper, which I haven't read, so I don't know what the ant is doing there, but I'm curious. For many years, he taught in the English department and directed the interdisciplinary arts program at Shippensburg University. He is the recipient of a number of awards for his teaching and his writing. He lives in the Cumberland Valley of South Central Pennsylvania. Please join me in welcoming John Taggart.
Such kindness. I don't know if I'm deserving. I'd like to reward those people who were at my talk earlier and had to hear the title of my talk was Blood Count, which some of you may know is also the title of a very famous composition, a song by Billy Strayhorn, the longtime composer and arranger for Duke Ellington. The very last thing he ever did, as Billy Strayhorn, in fact, done on his hospital bed very short time before he died. Moving thing. And I'll read that, or this poem, especially for those people. Can you hear me clearly in the back? Okay. It's called At the Counter's Ball. This has I also want to honor especially a poet closely associated with your university, this locale, Robert Duncan. I so often think of the historically famous Berkeley Poetry Conference, which should have been Duncan's occasion, but wasn't. We'll go into that, and I'll try to make this sort of small gesture toward remaking it Robert's occasion. When you're writing, as you're going along, occasionally, of course, you get into little bumps. And I was at a bump moment. I just happened to remember an introduction Robert had written for one of my books, Dodeca, and he makes this big deal about counting. And he says something like, I think he opens his piece with something like, Taggart is a counter. So I thought, all right. You know, sometimes you are what they say you are. And thinking from that came this. At the Counter's Ball. This is for all my talk sufferance audience, especially. I am giving blood back to those who gave blood to me. Only they understand that language. At the Counter's Ball. Last dance, a waltz, jazzed up, slowed down, out of time, real easy, isn't three, played free. And so, all the time in the world, last dance. For the counters, it's the last dance at the Counter's Ball, a waltz. For the counters who've spent all their time counting. What's lost? Like things, like favorite things, not things, like time. After the ball is over, back in their counting houses, the counters will be counting what's lost. And all the counters are laughing because I ask Emily, do I repeat myself? And she said, but very well. And they're dancing because they've lost count and don't care, and because it's the last dance, and I'm dancing, laughing and dancing with the oh so divine Miss Emily D. I read that once at a prep school. And there was a chubby little fellow sitting in the front. I get through reading this, and I'm starting to talk or read the next one, and all of a sudden I notice this big smile on his face. He got it. The problem with Selected is, while it's a new book, it's sort of not the new book. And when you're giving a reading, there's always this psychology of the new baby. And if you've worked at a supermarket or been in a supermarket line, you know what happens when young parents show up at the supermarket with new baby. All right? What does the cashier have to do if you want to keep your job? What a beautiful baby. That baby has such eyes. Those are your eyes. I know they're your eyes. And so forth. Well, naturally, if it's yours, you feel excited about it. When you have a new book out and you're reading, I realize only I am telling you the truth, but what they're actually saying to you, however profound, recondite, and so forth, see my new baby. Or more likely, love my new baby. So I'm going to read around and in this, and in a sense, reacquaint myself with myself. Slow song for Mark Rothko. 3 parts. To breathe and stretch one's arms again. To breathe through the mouth, to breathe through the mouth, to utter in the most quiet way. Not to whisper, to breathe through the mouth in the most quiet way, to breathe. To sing, to breathe, to sing, to breathe, to sing the most quiet way. To sing to light, the most quiet light in darkness. Radiantia, radiantia, singing light in darkness. To sing as the host sings in his house. To breathe through the mouth, to breathe through the mouth, to breathe, to sing in the most quiet way, to sing. The seeds in the earth breathe forth, not to whisper the seeds, not to whisper in the earth, to sing the seeds in the earth the most quiet way, to sing the seeds in the earth breathe forth. To sing to light the most quiet light in darkness, radiant light of seeds in the earth, singing light in the darkness. To sing as the host sings in his house. To breathe through the mouth, to breathe, to sing in the most quiet way, not to whisper, the seeds in the earth breathe forth, to sing totality of the seeds, not to eat, to sing the seeds in the earth, to be at ease, to sing totality, totality, to sing, to be at ease, to sing, to light the most quiet light in darkness, be at ease with radiant seeds, with singing light in darkness, to sing as the host sings in his house. Part 2. To breathe and stretch one's arms again, to stretch, to straighten, to stretch, to rise, to stretch, to straighten, to rise, to full height, not to torture, to rise to full height, to give, to hold out to give the hand, to hold out the hand, to give, to hold out to give self-lighted flowers in the darkness, fiery saxifrage, to hold out self-lighted flowers in darkness, to give as the host gives in his house, to stretch, to straighten, to stretch, to rise to full height, not to torture, not to rise, to give, to hold out, to give the hand, to hold out the hand, to give hope, hope of perfect rest, to give hope of perfect rest, to give, to hold out to give self-lighted flowers in the darkness, perfect and fiery hope, to hold out lighted flowers in darkness, to give as the host gives in his house. To stretch, to stretch, to straighten, to stretch, to rise to full height, not to torture, to give the hand, to hold out the hand, to give hope of perfect rest, to rest, not to lay flat, not to lay out, to rest as seeds in the earth, to give rest, to hold out to give self-lighted flowers in the darkness, fiery hope of perfect rest, to hold out light flowers in darkness, to give as the host gives in his house. Part 3. To breathe and stretch one's arms again, to join arm in arm, to join arm in arm, to join, to take into, to join, to take into a state of intimacy, not in anger, to join arm in arm, to join arms, to take into intimacy, to take into the light in the darkness, into the excited phosphor, to be in light in the darkness, to take as the host takes into his house, to join arms, arm in arm, to join arm in arm, to join, to take into, to join, to take into a state of intimacy, not anger, to take as the earth takes seeds, as the poor must be taken into, to take into intimacy, to take into the light in the darkness, into the phosphor, star flowers, to be in the light in the darkness, to take as the host takes into his house, to join arm in arm, to join arm in arm, to join arms, to take into a state of intimacy, not anger, to take as the earth takes seeds, as the poor must be taken into, to end the silence and the solitude, to take into intimacy, to take into the light in the darkness, into star flowers before sunrise, to be in light in the darkness, to take as the host takes into his house. I'd like to read a very opposite, much later poem, which some, in my mind, connects with this. It's called Rhythm and Blues Singer. In four parts, written on the occasion of the death of the singer James Carr. He had one hit, which, as is often the case, was more a hit for others than for himself. Dark End of the Street. I think it's Borges, the Argentine writer, who says eventually all poems become epitaphs. I think that's wrong. I think it's exactly the other way around. Poems begin as epitaphs and had the possibility of ending as life. To be remembered is to be alive. This is in 4 parts. I won't read the part sections. It's from a much later book called Pastorals. Dead in January in Memphis, James Carr, rhythm and blues singer who never learned to read or write. Superior, so superior to Bartleby, who failed to unlearn reading and writing, sever the ties that bind. Words entangle us, words in letters of the alphabet, the letters in written words. Rhythm equals the backbeat of all biological pleasures. Blues equal bad luck and trouble, trouble in mind. To sing is to be untied. Language before writing, before reading, before the alphabet, acoustic, river, a river of sound, river, a river of action, charm and more than charm, conferred by sound, action for survival, what to do, how to do, what to do. Language after writing, after reading, after the alphabet, visual, signs, no wonders, silent in silent lines, silent signs in silent lines for argument, a river silenced and straightened, syllogism, one line. All men are mortal. James Carr is a man, another. Dark, tangled and entangled at the dark end of the street, a you and a me, and us like Pierre and Isabel, readers, readers and writers and lovers, found, going to be found entangled in the letters, in written words, in the invention of romance. Song of the rhythm and blues singer who couldn't read or write, nor could survive mortality, could care less. I hope you'll see the connection between the poem I read before and this one. For me, the one line which I simply wrote as part of the poem, the composition going on, to sing is to be untied. If I were to have a gravestone marker, I'd put that on it. I think that's about what I've learned and what I believe in. Let's go a little bit backwards, and someone I talked about earlier. Very important person in my life, the jazz musician, arguably the greatest jazz musician of all time, John Coltrane. Takes from one of his most famous compositions, Giant Steps. To want to be a saint, to want to be a saint, to want to be a saint, to be the snake-tailed one, to want to be snake-tailed with wings, to be a snake-tailed saint with wings, to want to be a saint, to want to awaken men, wake men from nightmare. To go down to raise, to go down to raise, to go down the ladder, to go down as taught steps taught by the master, as taught to dance with giant steps, to go to dance to step dance with giant steps, as taught by the master to dance, to go down the ladder, to go down to raise men from nightmare. To want to be a saint, to want to be a saint, to want to be snake-tailed, with wings, to be a snake-tailed saint, with wings, to leap upon the horse-headed woman, the blue-eyed woman who chokes the throat, to want to be a saint, to wake men from nightmare, to go down to raise, to go down to raise, to go down the ladder, to go down as taught by the master, as taught to dance to step dance, to dance with giant steps, to dance with giant steps, down the ladder, to dance down as taught by the master, to dance down the ladder to obtain possession, to go down to raise men from nightmare. To want to be a saint, to want to be a saint, to want to be a snake-tailed saint with wings, to leap upon the horse-headed woman, the blue-eyed woman, the woman with the little moon who chokes the throat, to want to be a saint, to wake men from nightmare. To go down to raise, to go down to raise, to go down the ladder, to go to dance as taught by the master, to dance, to step dance, to dance with giant steps, to dance with giant steps, to dance down the ladder, to as taught by the master, to obtain possession, to dance down to raise men with a horn, to go down to raise men from nightmare. To want to be a saint, to want to be a saint, to want to be a snake-tailed saint with wings, to leap upon the horse-headed, the blue-eyed woman with a little moon, the woman with 9 shadows, who chokes the throat, to want to be a saint, to wake men from nightmare. To go down to raise, to go down to raise, to go down the ladder, to dance as taught by the master, to step dance, to dance with giant steps, to dance with giant steps, to dance down as taught by the master, to obtain possession, to dance down, to raise men with a horn, a tenor horn, to go down, to raise men from nightmare. A little sort of sound workout called Babble Babble. Ba. 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 Bab. 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 Babble. Babble, 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 like the solitary child who has no radio, who has no knowledge of how to turn the dial, who would not know how constant song is in the air. Ba, 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 bab, 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 babble, 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 babble. Like the solitary child who has no radio, who has no knowledge of how to move on up a little higher, who would not know how to march all around the altar. Ba, 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 bab, 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 babble, 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 like the solitary child who has no radio, who has no knowledge of how it will always be howdy, 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 and never goodbye, who would not know. It's a poem, The Lily Alone, for Susan Howe. Susan and I were talking on the phone one another, and I was telling her how disgusting I thought my name was. And Susan is a dramatic person, privately, and she was not going to be outdone by me. And so on the other end, I heard, but John, this long silence, Susan. It was like, doesn't it just make you sick to say it? And I thought, well, that sounds all right to me. So I wrote this poem. It's all based on the associations and so forth with the name. Susan, I read it recently at Yale, and Susan showed up. So I thought, all right, sweetheart, I'm going to read this to you direct. And so I read it. I said, you probably don't even like that, do you? And it's very funny. She's a quite eloquent woman, as you know, and she made this sort of arg sound. I'm not sure if that's approval or not. The Lily Alone. Alone, lily alone, the lily alone looks pantherine. Look at the lily at bones as leaves and petals. Bones as the ring of the flower, ring of the flower's thought, the ring in motion. The motion of the ring is the motion of the animal. Skin and muscles burned away, the eyes burned also, burned to the essential, to bone dance, bone song, breath of song, like the panther's fragrant breath. Listen to the bones. They have made your name sweet. She said, arg. This takes a while. It's in 9 parts. I won't read the part numbers. Marvin Gaye Suite. 17 seconds of party formulaics by professional football players. Intro of 17 seconds of, hey man, what's happening? And right on party of those gathered to be laid by the voice that lays. Don't have to be a jock to be gathered, brought together for the lay. Marvin mixed over the party. Marvin calls out twice to mother. Surely mother must be the answer. Forget about the father's tongue. If not one, then the other. Not father, unexpected relief of the other. Mother blackens her breast. Mother goes to bed with father. Marvin left with his father. Marvin calls 3 times to Father. Marvin calls, Father, Father, Father. We don't need to escalate. Marvin calls out 3 times to Father within the Father's house. Isn't this ironic? You probably can't help but feel superior. Calling out 3 times to Father in the house of the Father's voice. Listening to Marvin, I want to cry. It makes me want to cry. Like Edgar, witnessing the maddened king arraigning his daughters. Isn't this ironic? Calling to Father in the Father's house. Another call, can he get a witness? Somebody, somewhere. And in the meantime, it's right on, baby. It's right on, right on. I'm a witness. I'll talk to him so I can see what's going on. What's going on? Party of those gathered, brought together for the lay. Party of those gathered to be laid by the voice that lays. Those who believe that to linger and tarry is to be sheltered. I'll talk to Marvin. I'll talk to you who have yet to be brought together. What's going on? What's always going on in the house of the voice? Bass figure, fat, half note, 2/8, another 2, and hold. I'd attribute the Motown sound to Jamie Jamerson's busy bass. Sound there before Motown, sound of the voice, busy before the bass. Marvin wants to know what's happening. The voice is what is. The busy voice is what's happening, what is happening across this land. Marvin wants to know what else is new, 'cause he's slightly behind. Nothing else, what is, what's happening. The voice is what's happening. Jamerson died of complications from a heart attack in Los Angeles. Marvin stopped sexual healing show to pray for his soul. Marvin stopped asking for that sexy rhythm, for that sexy beat. And the beat was largely the invention of Jamie Jamerson. The voice busy before the bass, the beat, the voice's invention. To pray is to stop asking. To pray is to be silent, to remain silent. Silent remains silent until the voice is heard, the voice of the Father. Isn't this ironic? You probably can't help but feel superior. Isn't this ironic? To stop asking for that rhythm, for that beat. To stop asking, be silent until sound of the Father's voice is heard. The busy voice is what's happening, what is happening across this land. Wouldn't do any good to pray for Marvin, who doesn't understand. Would it do any good to pray? Do any good to pray for Marvin's soul? I'm a witness. Wandering witness, not praying. I'm wandering. Wandering means moving with the wrong rhythm on the wrong beat. Listening to Marvin, I want to cry. It makes me want to cry. I'm a witness. I'm wandering, not praying, wandering on the wrong beat. It's not do, it's who. Marvin taught how to fix his mouth muscles. It's who. Marvin taught to make his breath part of the sound, his breath part of the phrasing, his breath part of the sound there before Marvin, the sound of the voice, busy before Marvin. It's not who, it's who. It's a hook. It's a hook made smooth, made so very smooth. Ooh. The singer has been hooked so very smooth that he hardly feels it. So smooth. Ooh. He hardly feels it. What the singer feels is elation and elegance and exultation. He's part of the sound of the voice. What the singer feels is a high. He's flying high in the friendly sky. Marvin thought cocaine was the boy who made slaves out of men. It's not cocaine. It's the word in child who fixed Marvin's mouth. So smooth. Ooh. So smooth, he hardly feels it. The singer feels he's flying. Rest of the folks lay their bodies down. Party of those gathered to be laid by the voice that lays, hooked and gathered by the voice, through Marvin's voice to be laid. Those gathered feel their faces being eaten away. They don't care. Then hooked so very smooth, the folks want to linger. They want to tarry. Hook made smooth, made so smooth. Ooh. You can think you won't be hooked by the hook of the Father's voice. You can think you won't be hooked by the hook of the singer's voice. Marvin thought cocaine was the boy who made slaves out of men. You can think you won't be hooked by the voice through Marvin's voice. I just want to ask about world in despair, world destined to die. What would that be? Would be without hope? Would be that world? Without hope of kingdom to come, without the river of water of life? River of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne. Children held in the crystal river, thread of remembrance severed. World without hope of kingdom to come, that would be that world. That the river would dry up, it would, river, dried up, riverbed. Marvin asked, who really cares? Who's willing to try to save a world? He means world of hope, of kingdom to come. He means this river world. Isn't this ironic, asking to save this world that will not die? This world of hope, of kingdom to come, Father's world that won't die. Marvin wants to save this world for the children. Let's save the children. Let's save the children, spoken. Let's save all the children, spoken. Save the babies, sung. Quick fill on soprano, save the babies, sung. Perhaps the single most emotional moment he ever reached on record. Marvin issued and used multi-tracking to sing with himself, speaking and singing. His singing voice higher than his speaking, almost a woman's voice, speaking and singing the sound of the voice through his voice. I just want to ask a question. What we're saving all the children for. What we're saving all the children for, saving them to be laid. This is the Father's world. This world won't die. Father's voice won't. Saving the children to be gathered together in this world of hope. Children in river of water, of life, proceeding out of the throne. Children in the crystal river, the thread of remembrance, severed. Downshift from dig it everybody, to think about it, to talk about it. 3 times from Marvin, don't go and talk about my father. The warning given 3 times, don't go and talk about my father. 3 times the warning given in a voice made smooth, so very smooth. Don't want to, and have to talk about Father. I'll tell you. I'm a witness. I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on? Party of those gathered, brought together for the lay, gathered by Father's voice through Marvin's voice to be laid. One reason Marvin loved his father was because he offered him Jesus. Marvin was thrilled and fascinated with the idea of tarrying. That's where you wait, where you repeat over and over, over and over, thank you, Jesus, repeat over and over, thank you, Jesus, where you repeat over and over, thank you, Jesus, for minutes and hours. Repetition is choice. You choose to be part of the party that waits. Those who believe that to linger and tarry is to be sheltered. Vaughan, the Silurist, warns of the deliberate search for idle words, of the leaving of parricides behind and no other monument, as if there needed to be another, as if any other monument were needed. This is the Father's world. It won't die, Father's voice won't. Don't want to, and have to talk about Father. Marvin was shot twice by his father on April 1st, 1984 in Los Angeles. Marvin was shot twice by his father in his father's house. Yes, if you linger and tarry, you will be sheltered in his house. In his house are many mansions. In his house there are many parties. Shared term between last song and this song, the term is mercy. When you call on him for mercy, Father, he'll be merciful, my friend. Marvin knows when you call on him, he'll be merciful. When you call, there's response. It's that old call and response. Call and response of the Father's voice, sound of the Father's voice. Sound unites groups of living beings as nothing else does. United, gathered by the sound of the Father's voice through Marvin. Groups, parties of those gathered, brought together for the lay. House full of people from which no one as of yet has gone out. People in the house of the Father's voice. Father's voice won't die. Where did all the blue skies go? Is a question they can answer. Went into the house. The blue skies went into the Father's house. The blue skies went into the Father's house. Mercy, mercy me, the ecology. People call for mercy, and there's the sound of the Father's voice. Blue skies call, and there's the smooth and zealous sound. Call and response of the Father's voice. Sound of the Father's voice. Sound unites groups of those who were living as nothing else. Ah, things are what they used to be. Ah, what they used to be and ever will be. Same as they ever were. Give Mr. Burns some credit. Same as they were. There has got to be a way. Mr. Burns burning down the house. Pointer sisters are burning. They're burning, doing the neutron dance. The house won't burn. The Father's house won't burn down to the ground. Marvin's in the house. Marvin knows when you call on him for mercy, call and response of the Father's voice, sound of the Father's voice. Oh, feel it. Feel it, oh, everybody, feel it. Marvin knows that's all right. He knows that's all right, people. Oh, when we're loved by the Father knows that's all right. Marvin knows that's all right. Everybody feel it at the love party of those gathered, brought together, those gathered by the voice through Marvin's voice to be laid. Sound of Marvin's voice, good to party, fun to party with you, baby. Sound of Marvin's voice, the thrill is real, and it's oh so good, baby. Marvin pronounces thrill so that it rhymes with real. Marvin was thrilled and fascinated with the idea of tarrying. Over and over, thank you, Jesus, until you feel your face being eaten away. Feel it, everybody. The thrill is real, and it's oh so good, baby. Marvin feels there's only time for praying and for a love party. To pray is to stop asking, is to be silent, to remain silent. Marvin sings the Lord's Prayer on his Dream of a Lifetime album. The singer has been hooked, so very smooth that he hardly feels it. Those gathered feel the thrill of the Father's tongue against their teeth. If you let him, Marvin will take you to live where love is king. Marvin will take you where love is king, the king and his secret life. Love 4 times in a row, love 4 times, so smooth and so zealous. Listening to Marvin, I want to cry, it makes me want to cry. Like Edgar crying through his Babel song, I smell the blood. Isn't this ironic? We probably can't help but feel superior. There has got to be a way, and there is no way out of the house. I'm a witness, wandering, not praying, wandering in the house of the voice. Holy, to be holy, holy, is to be holy, the excrement of the voice, the excrement, the stinking fruit, the stinking darkness in the low cars. To be holy, holy is to be in the low cars in the train of the voice. Come together, people, got to get together to be holy, holy. You've got to believe whatever lingers and tarries is sheltered. There can be a train in the house. There can be many trains in the house. You can pull the train at the love party of those gathered together, those gathered by the voice through Marvin's voice to be laid, sound of Marvin's voice, good to party, fun to party with you, baby. You can pull the love train, baby, right on, honey, right on. You can pull the love train, baby, and you can repeat, thank you, Jesus. One reason Marvin loved his father was he offered him Jesus. Jesus left a long time ago, said he would return, kingdom to come. He left us a book to believe in. We've got an awful lot to learn. Marvin says we'd better believe it. Marvin says we've got a lot to learn. We've got to learn he is returned. Kingdom to come is kingdom come. This is the Father's world. This world won't die. Father's voice won't. We've got to learn it's too late to play dead in the low cars. Aretha sings Holy, Holy on her Amazing Grace album. Aretha makes up new words to go with Marvin's song as she goes along, moving and grooving with love, doing and fooling with love. Southern California Community Choir behind her. It's not do, it's who. It's not who, it's ooh. So smooth and so zealous. If it could only be that night, silent night across the nation. Heartbeat rhythm of the bass, heartbeat rhythm across this land. Marvin said if we stop, if we listen to the rhythm of our heartbeat, Marvin said we'll hear the rhythm of the Father's voice. The sound there before Marvin, before Motown sound of the voice, before the bass. If we stop long enough, we'll be gathered, brought together by the voice. If we stop long enough, we'll be laid by the voice that lays. Da-da. 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 That the heart would be torn out. Da-da. 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 Heartbeat rhythm. Marvin said his church lived within his own heart, would be torn out. Da-da. Da-da. The way they did his life, it makes him want to holler. Marvin thought they were the lawyers from the government. Marvin thought cocaine was the boy who made slaves out of men. It's the word and child who fixed Marvin's mouth. It's the father. It's the father who fixed Marvin's mouth, his father in his heart. In the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry, there's a model heart. Model heart to walk in, children held by their parents. What the children hear is da-da, 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 da-da. Listening to Marvin, what I hear is da-da, da-da, da-da. Listening to Marvin, I want to cry, it makes me want to cry. Listening to Marvin, I want to holler and throw up my arms. Like Edgar, under the weight of this sad time, this same sad time, I'm a witness. I'm wandering, not praying, in the house of the voice. I'm wandering, not grooving, wandering, moving to the wrong beat. I think I'll read just a few more. It's called Refrains. For Robert Quine. Bob Quine was a classmate of mine in college. Those of you who are hip and with it in terms of rock music will know him. He's one of the famous ace guitarists. He's the wild guitar you hear on Lou Reed's Blue Mask album and on many others. His wife died of cancer. He grieved. Simply could not endure life without her and committed suicide. It's called Refrains for Robert Quine. It has a little head note from Richard Hell and the Voidoids, which is one of the groups he played with. Love comes in spurts and goes, is gone. Cause for mourning, head in hands, in tears. Going to be a long, long wait for the resurrection of the dead. There are birds, there is birdsong. Unmourning and unmournful at sunrise in the white light. There is a garden with high walls around it, Jardin de Plaisir, of mint and lavender, of hyssop in hedges, glassy beads of water on velvet leaves, purple flaked lupin spikes above velvet pulmonaria. There is a gardener, La Belle Jardinière, bare-breasted and barefooted, bouquets of all flowers in her arms and woven in her hair. And it hurts not good but bad to see a man head in hands in tears. It breaks you up to see a man come down in tears. There are birds, there is birdsong. Having come through hunger and danger, there is free song, a free weaving of many songs, song against song and other songs clustered, spun out in a blending of wavy pitches. Tant doucement. The phrase means what the song means, freshness, that meaning so sweetly and freely as a gardener weaves flowers in her hair.
Can we stay in the weave of that meaning? Can we, should we attempt to stay, to linger in a pleasure garden, everlasting dream of love tomorrow, its unseen secret structure, when our time remains a bad time, and what time wasn't bad, wasn't and isn't a time of hunger and danger, of young men and older men in tears, our time a time of terror and counter-terror. Can we, should we, our time remaining a really bad time, a really down and dirty time of terror? What walls do not fall, and who says they have no fear? And boo-hoo-hoo, like dolls. Hurts breaks you up like dolls get broken. The visible human, the visibly spastic plastic. There are birds, there is birdsong. Unmourning and unmournful having come through. There is a garden with swept gravel paths. Dream design, bel et bon designed, connecting and interconnecting, non brisé, where men and women are in contemplation, in conversation, in one another's eyes. There is a gardener holding her bouquets and holding her skirts like the light, like so sweetly woven song, like love never for sale. Let's stop there. Thank you. Thank you very much.